Hello everyone, this is a short video to show how to install my indirect sensor modification. To do this you'll need an extruder body. Imagine that's an entire extruder body and not just the top 15mm, a small plastic wedge, filament sensor, an MF63ZZ flanged bearing, the original 10mm M3 screw that holds the filament sensor in place, and a small M3 countersunk screw to hold the bearing in place. To install, I would recommend, rather than pulling apart your extruder body, you just take the filament sensor off the old one just to check it all works before pulling everything apart. To do the install, start by just dropping the bearing into its little hole, and then put the M3 countersunk screw, not going all the way in, just enough to hold the bearing in place while we check that it works properly. So put it most of the way into the hole, just till it's just flush with the inside wall of the sensor chamber, and that should be enough to hold the bearing in place. So you can see you've got bearing, and then just beneath that, flush with the head of the bearing and the sensor wall, is the sensor chamber wall, is the top of the M3 bolt. Once you've done that, just grab some filament, run it through, and just check that the bearing rotates. If it doesn't, pull it all apart and just check there's no debris or anything in the bearing chamber. It can be quite difficult to see if the bearing moves or not. So often the best way I find to do that is to grab a bright torch or something and shine that on the bearing. That'll show up whether it's rotating or not. Once that's done, grab the little plastic wedge. You can see that it has a small hole for the M3 countersunk screw to slot into, and a window that the filament sensor looks through. And just drop that, checking the bearing's still in the right spot. Drop that in so it's against the back wall. Once that's in place, grab your filament sensor, and it should just slide in, making a little filament sensor sandwich like so. Once that's done, just check that everything lines up, and put the original M3 screw in place. Obviously don't force it, it should just screw through the wedge and the filament sensor together. Just hold everything down while you do so that it doesn't lift up above the surface of the extruder body. And what it does is, it doesn't sit within here, it actually presses against the wedge and holds the wedge, the filament sensor, in a nice tight unit. Once that's done, just screw the countersunk screw the rest of the way in. You don't want to force it. Keep an eye on this wall here. You don't want to see that being pushed against the extruder, the filament sensor. All you need to do is just make sure it's fairly flush with that back wall. Once you've done that, plug this back into your printer, and just under the support menu, extruder options, check that you can see an intensity value, and then just check that filament auto load works just by feeding some filament into the thing. It should activate the auto load system. Once you've checked it all works, then you can go out swapping the extruder bodies over.